everyone. Thank you for joining us here on landlordsjournal.com. The following is a show that we did back in November, I think November the 14th, 2010, back in the fall. And as everyone knows, I'm attempting to get all of our shows on YouTube.com. We currently stream live on Ustream. Unfortunately I cannot get it to automatically do it, so I have to do everything manually. So I'm going through and getting all of our shows on YouTube so everyone can go back and view them at your leisure. And also we have our podcast, the audio version, for those of you who wish to listen to the audio only, and that is found on our podcast tab of landlordsjournal.com. And so we invite you to listen in on the podcast and view our podcast, listen to whatever you want to do. So anyway, the following show is property management. Property management is an important part of investing in real estate, whether you do it yourself, whether you hire an outside company. And today we zero in on the difference between multi-unit and single-family home. There's a big difference how you manage a property when you have an apartment building versus a single-family home. Things are a little different, and we discussed that. And I know this from first-hand experience because we have a large apartment building and we have multi-family homes. We have duplexes, triplexes. We have about everything. Our biggest apartment building is a 10-unit. But the dynamics are different, and we discussed that today on the show. I will have this, the audio version here soon. You can listen to the audio for those of you who listen to our audio and download our podcast. You will have this one soon, and again, that's property management, a multi-unit and single-family home comparison. And I want everyone to keep in mind, we have, and I've been really trying to push this this fall. We plan on allowing real estate investors, landlords, people who have questions about their landlords, people who have questions about rental property or anything to do with real estate. We invite you to call in this fall to our show. Also, we want to remind you that we have our forums that you can ask questions on as well, and the Ask a Landlord tab, where you could ask us a personal question and we'll try to respond to you. Also, we have our scheduled shows on the landlordsjournal.com tab, and in the future we also plan on having, probably this winter, a membership site where you can follow through with some of the deals that we make, things that we don't really want to put out there in the public. You can pay a small membership fee and have that information at your disposal, kind of learn as we go, kind of all learn together, and you can kind of watch behind us on what we're doing. As any of you know, education is key, and education is expensive, and so we want to share that with you, but again, we don't want to make all that information public. So anyway, I hope you enjoy the show, and again, if you have any questions, feel free to email us on landlordsjournal.com. We have a convenient email tab there for you to email us at your leisure. Thank you.
Welcome to landlordsjournal.com on this Sunday morning, November 14th. And check the calendar. And you are live with the same usual crew, same usual place. And our topic today is an interesting one that I think we'll all learn a little bit from with our discussion. Comparing management perspectives on multi-unit properties versus single-family properties. And I think we all have some experience with both, and there are pros and cons to each, and there's not really a right or a wrong necessarily. I think it's just kind of where you are and how you choose to invest and proceed. You know what your comfort level is in your area. You know what you want to do. So sometimes it's good to dissect those types of issues and come to some greater understanding about something, I think. So what about if, to stay on track and on target, what if we started off with multi-unit management perspectives? I guess multi-unit can be from 2, all the way up to whatever, infinity. Buildings.
That's a big complex.
I'd like to,
Infinity's
infinity. I've got 5,000 units in my building. That'd be great. And I think even with that, there are some different perspectives on how you would handle 2 versus 3 and 4 and versus 10 or 100 units. John, would you like to start us off? You always have good opening thoughts.
Oh, I always do.
You do. Totally.
Our first piece of investment property was a 10-unit building, and to everyone's, no one thought that was a good idea. I gotta get rid of this.
I thought it was a good idea.
Yeah, it was a good. I mean, it was a good idea in retrospect. We learned a lot, but hold on a second.
And knowledge is power. A lot of things.
You don't need that.
A lot of things that you will do with your business, you're going to think to yourself, "Oh my gosh, this is terrible. This is awful." But you do get an education out of it, and I have to remind myself of that all the time because we keep having crappy stuff happen a lot of times. But still, I learn from it.
And then I tell him how bad it is, how bad it could be,
right.
And it makes him feel better.
Makes me feel better. So there is value in learning from bad things that happen, because then those mistakes are not repeated and you know what to do next time. So it's just a life lesson, incidental. That one was free today.
Well, what am I?
I'm sorry.
Who were the naysayers when you were first thinking about?
Like family members, people on the forums. I visited a lot of forums, real estate forums. I've been doing the forum thing. I've been visiting real estate forums for probably 10 years prior to that, or several years, maybe not, several years prior to that. And people were saying, "Oh, you don't want to do a 10-unit building, your first thing, blah 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 blah." And my one of my family members, who was also a real estate investor, had his own apartment building, said, and I use this to this day, it's like having 10 different families that you have to take care of and deal with, and when something goes wrong, you got to hear about it. And it was like having 10 different additional family members in addition to my large family that I hear about on a daily basis. It was like having 10 different family members and their own families. And so for the first year, it was fine. We had a property manager on there, and she kept things very quiet. We didn't hear from her much. We collected the money, and that was it. She kept them rented, and it wasn't until we stopped collecting the money we thought we should have been collecting that we caught on to her. She was having problems, and she went away. So after the first year was fine. We thought, "Oh, this is awesome, we got this 10-unit apartment building, we don't ever hear from anybody. She takes care of everything. Great, we're collecting the money. We have more than enough money to pay the mortgage. We have a positive cash flow." And we did. We had a large positive cash flow for the first year when she was taking care of it. And it was very nice. And then after the first year, soon after that, things went bad. And then I took over myself, and it was just plopped into my lap. And it was just like my family member said, you're being a social worker basically, or being the father figure, the big brother for 10 different families. You hear about it when you hear about their neighbors, you hear about their, if the neighbor's making too much noise, if their washing machine's too loud, if they're abusing their kids, if they think they're smoking pot, if, whatever is going on in that apartment building, you hear about it. And they think that they have to call you every little time something goes wrong, whether it's has to do with you or not.
May I ask a question? Do you think there's some type of correlation between the amount of rent or the type of tenants that you have or the area of the building you have maybe versus, you know what I'm saying? Is there more hassle with a lower rent versus a higher? Probably.
It seems like, to me, it appears that the less rent they pay, the more problems you have with them, the more they gripe and complain. The more rent they pay, I don't know this, just from my experience, the more rent someone pays, the less problem you have with them. The less they pay, the more problem. The more you hear from them. I mean, I don't know why that is. I mean, I have my theories, but yeah, you're exactly right. The less, and then this particular building was a low rent building, and I heard from someone, if a day didn't go by that I didn't hear from anybody, it was a good day. I mean, they'd want me to get in their squabbles, you know, and I would run down there, and the building was about 30 minutes away from where I live. And like a dummy, I would go down there and work it out, and you guys need to get along, you know, blah, 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 blah. And,
may I make an observation that's not going to be popular? I think what happened was, when you first took over, I think you were a little naive, and you welcomed the ability to help solve small problems, and then they really came to rely on you, and they gave you way more than they would have if you had been more standoffish in the beginning.
I'll let it in.
Well, once you build it, you can't take that back. It's a slippery slope, and then and it couldn't even, because there's an institutional history there where this person knows and they talk to this person. That person, you can't start fresh with somebody that you don't know, because you've got a history in the building of taking those kinds of phone calls. So it wasn't even that you could fix it once you started it. So I think that was a big
right. And then you have the whole. This is another subtopic, but you have the whole issue. If you let one person get by with something, like you let one person get by without having to pay a late fee or whatever, then you can count on the entire building is going to know that you let them get by with that. You let one person get by with paying the rent a little late, or you're not, consistent with everyone, then the whole building's going to know about that. And I didn't realize that at first. There were times when, in the beginning when we had the apartment building, or we still have it, but when we were managing it, we're not now. Or I was managing it, we're not now. I would let some people get by with more than others because their circumstances were different. They had different, whatever. And then everyone else, the other people would hear about it, and whether you knew it or not, whether they told you or not, you knew that they knew you let someone else get by with something that you're not letting them get by with. Right. I mean, so if you had to be very consistent, and I was not consistent in the beginning. Exactly. And then things just got, things like that, not being consistent with all the tenants, and them tattling on each other. They think they had to call me for everything. This person has, 10 people living in their apartment. You said that you were not supposed to have more than this many people living in the apartment. Why are you letting them and then I can't? And just things like that.
The tenants in the building, I just thought of a question. Did they mostly stay around during the day? Did they not work? Did they not leave the apartment to go work?
It just varied. Most of them, it just varied.
It seems like if you stay around someplace and you don't leave the apartment, that becomes your world, and you want more interaction, and you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Versus you have your home and you leave your home and you have your action at work and you do your...
And you don't worry about
you contribute to society outside your home, and you don't worry about that stuff.
Right.
When you come home, you don't have time for it, the energy that you're...
And that's where that's where the low income, that's where the people that were paying the low rent, a lot of them probably didn't have...
You were their social interaction.
I was there, but a lot of times I probably was. Yeah, a lot of times I probably was. And I would go down there, and what would break loose, and there'd be big, and I'd be in the middle of it.
And that's a learning curve. I mean, just from you guys, we learned that we need a middle man, woman, person, to separate the tenant from those social problems, and that you have to be consistent, and that you give an inch, and sometimes they're going to take, a foot or a yard or a mile. Yeah,
and they do. They do. I mean, you can't, and you have to be consistent. It's basically a community. It is a community. That apartment building, it's a large apartment building, and there was a lot of people living in there, and it's a lot of people interacting.
So maybe one of the cons then of a multi-unit management type of building with the management is that you might have to be more socially involved, or you could get pulled in to be more socially involved in what you want if you're not careful.
If you're not careful.
From the very beginning. So if somebody out there, viewers, they're thinking about taking on a large multifamily, and 10 is actually, imagine if you had 20 or 30 like
Right.
that. I mean, that could
Yeah.
double, triple, quadruple
I
your
couldn't
problem.
imagine. I would not advise that.
You
to
know,
anyone.
so going into it might be wise advice to say, build that barrier from the beginning, find you a good management person.
Good
Right,
luck.
and I would say
Yeah.
separate the ownership of the building, separate the ownership from the management. When you go in there, if you are the owner, pretend like you're not. Pretend like you're the manager of the building, and you have no control over well, they told me, I have to do this, and that's it. Because if the minute they know that you have leeway or flexibility, it's all over.
John got reported to the home office.
I got reported to the home office. I mean, home office.
That's
And
hilarious.
Yeah. So what's funny is that the person he was talking to John and didn't know it. He called the office.
I was trying to do that. I was trying to morph myself into separate. Like I'm just the manager. This is the management. We even separated separate management company. The whole 9 yards.
Right.
I got to do what they tell me. Blah blah blah. Because we were getting there's a new group of people in there.
The board.
The board. That's what they called us. That's what they called the owners. The board.
The board.
So we had like this fancy number. Like it was from New York State, we're not in New York State obviously, but it was like an internet number, okay? And so I had that number on all their information sheets and all that kind of stuff. And so I went down there and got into it with one of the tenants, of course. Surprise, but I went down there and got into it with him. So he called that number. He thought he was just going to turn me in. I was being rude and unwilling to negotiate and blah, 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 blah. So I answered the phone. He said one of your guys down here was down here being rude to me, and he was blah 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 blah. And I said, now what city and state's this in? And I'm like, he goes, well, he said my name. This guy's being, and I never did tell him any different. But I was rude right back to him. Because I couldn't stand the guy.
What city and state is
I could not stand the guy, but he caught me off guard because he didn't read.
So the board was as rude as the manager.
Exactly.
The board
so
upheld the managers.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I was like, he goes, well, you guys are just so rude, and I'm like, blah 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 blah. I mean, I was like arguing with him on the phone. He didn't even realize it was me. He did not realize it was me. So he moved out shortly after that because he couldn't get anywhere. But he thought he was going to call and turn me in. But it's important that you separate the ownership from the management. I mean, the management from the ownership. And a lot of times, most of the time, hotels will do this. This property is managed by so-and-so. So the management company is responsible for the toilet paper, the light bulbs, the tenant problems. That way, if a person would fall on their property or have a problem with something in the building, they got to sue the management company first, and then the owners. And that's why it's important to have separation. And we didn't know that in the beginning. We knew it. We didn't practice it. We knew it. We just didn't practice it. You need to separate the ownership, the management from the ownership, and that's what we do now. We separate the management and the ownership, even if it's basically the same thing. Even if you are doing it, you still need to separate it. And what I do now, the properties that we manage ourselves, or I say, this is such and such management company managing this, and they don't even know who the owner is. So that's,
I never realized that. I had always thought about. We have learned while we've been in this business that it's good for an asset, from an asset protection perspective, to literally have to have a management company that's managing the properties and have the asset of the property itself in a holding company from a management way, from an asset protection a company structure perspective. But you're saying it's also reflected in the day-to-day operations.
Exactly.
That it's good to have that kind of a firewall between the two. So you can, whoever is dealing with the tenant, it can be the can have a facade that you don't have the authority to make any exceptions, because you're the manager. You're not the you can't speak for the, you can't make changes for the owner, and the owner.
I just work here.
Yeah, I just work here. That's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's
I'm just doing my job. You know how it is. You know.
Those damn owners, those people, they
They won't listen to anything.
This is just my job.
But I got turned in that particular day for being rude down there, and he was talking to me, and he didn't know at all that he was actually speaking with me. He never did know, you know, because I went and talked to him the next day. He didn't tell me he turned me in though.
No?
He didn't tell me. Hey, yeah, he didn't say I turned you in.
You didn't tell him that you had heard from
I didn't tell him.
You hadn't heard from Central
Like
Office.
I got a raise yesterday.
Yeah.
You should have told him. No, that's funny.
What if, okay, let's maybe change a little bit. I just thought of something. What if we had talked about this the other day? I don't know if we talked about it on camera or not. Late fees with people in rent. Any difference you think with a home versus an apartment?
Yeah, you have to be more, in a single-family home, you could be more flexible with late fees, like, you know, which we have that scenario now. You can choose to assess them or not assess them based on the individual. Sometimes, it's about collecting them. You can charge them all day long, but whether you collect them or not is another story.
Well, and the reason for that is what you were talking about earlier, is that it's hard to make difference within the same building without everyone finding out. Is that the reason?
Right. That's what I was getting ready to say. You have to be more consistent in your enforcement in a multi-unit building, especially a 10-unit apartment building. You can't charge one person a late fee each time, an excessive late fee, or from their point of view, an excessive late fee, and then the other person you let slide by. The other group of people. And that's assuming, because 9 times out of 10, you're going to have half your people paying their rent late, from our experience. Half of them are going to pay late.
Wow, that many, huh? Yeah.
Half of them did. Half of them, and then you have a small percentage that pay it, like, on the dime.
Yeah,
it's the first, and they're there, and they're after you to get it to you, and they're worried about it, and then they even want to pay it in advance and all that kind of stuff. But half of them pay it late.
And so that's like 50% based on your many years as landlords.
Yeah, and I'm not talking excessively late. I'm not talking months and months and months.
Just late.
I'm talking about it's due on the 1st. We have a 4-day grace period, and after the 5th, and they're paying it like on the 8th or the 9th. That's where the 50% comes in. Then you have a smaller percentage that do get behind like that, but they're the ones that don't have a very long tenure at your property. They're gone after a few months.
Well, then on a similar vein, you have to be more consistent with your enforcement of eviction.
You
I
do.
would think as well versus a house.
You do.
Which we're facing right now.
You do.
So, like you say, with a house, you can probably be more flexible with terms and accept a little bit of rent. Okay, you're going to catch up with this. But then you got 10 people coming at you with different stories. Who do you believe?
Right.
What's real and what's not.
Well, it's a competition, so you can have the most outlandish emergency.
Oh.
You do, and the evictions, if they know that you have a reputation of not putting up with any bull,
right,
then they're going to pay their rent on time. If they know, if you're consistent across the board, and a person gets a month behind, then you're throwing their rear end out. I don't care how good of a story they have. I don't care how good of a person you have, how good of a person you think they are. It's about making an example for the other 9 people in that building. It's basically making an example out of them. If you have a tenant in a 10-unit apartment building that you think has good, you think they'll catch up, and you think they'll end up being a good tenant, and you think they're just having a bad time, you can't. You still have to evict them, because if you don't, the other 9 are going to think they can do the same thing.
Right.
In a house, you don't have to worry about that as much. Right. So if you think they're going to end up being okay, they're just coming through a rough spell, and they'll make it right. Then you can say, okay, you can have an extra. We have to pay the late fees, but you can have a little extra time or whatever. In a 10-unit apartment building, you don't have that. You really don't have that option. you have the option, but you're going to pay for it later.
Yeah,
because the other 9 are going to say, well, heck, they let the other guys go 3 months and they didn't charge them late fees or whatever, so heck, I'm going to do the same thing. It's about forming a reputation. In an apartment building where everyone knows each other, it's about forming a reputation. If you have a reputation of not putting up with bull crap, not putting up with not putting up with people paying their rent late, not putting up with, just having a low tolerance for that stuff, then they're going to fall in line. They're going to follow the rules, and they're going to pay the rent on time for the most part. But if you have, it's like a teacher. If a teacher has a reputation of being lenient, then everyone's going to, letting them get by with murder and then giving them all A's. Everyone's going to want to take her class. So if you have a reputation of being a building that lets them get by with anything, they don't even have to pay a deposit. They can move in with a can of corn or whatever. You have that reputation of being that way. You're going to have every misfit in the city coming to want to rent your building. And so a lot of it's about, when you have a building, a lot of it's about building your reputation. And that's what we're trying to do, is rebuild our reputation in the community. It's not putting up with any bull.
Right.
In a single family home, it's a little different because you don't have that. You can go, people can go from house to house to house, and you don't really have. It's harder to have like a reputation.
Right.
But like in a building where it's a community, and people like flock to that building, and people know the building, they know the name of it, they know where it is, they know people live there. It's more, it's more about reputation. So in an apartment building situation, it's about building a reputation of not putting up with any crap, and having a low tolerance for that kind of stuff. So you cannot be, if you were doing it correctly, you should not be flexible in anything. If they're late on their rent, I don't care what kind of person you are, what you're promising me or whatever, or what if I think you're going to be okay, you got them out anyway.
Well, it sounds like if you are flexible, which no one wants to screw somebody over, but everybody goes through hard times. But if you are super flexible, that's going to eat up your time as a landlord, and time is money. And that's with one 8-unit building. And if you want to grow and be big, imagine if you had 10 8-unit buildings. How much more time there's not enough time in the day. You'd have to hire somebody to handle phone calls and catch up mail and answer emails and knock on doors. I mean, it's a waste. It doesn't sound very efficient.
And that's another advantage of being at an apartment building. They're all down there, so you collect your rent all in one sweep. If you have 10 different houses in 10 different areas, because I'm telling you, I mean, I have tried this. To have them send, them the rent in, it doesn't work as nicely as it does in your head. They'll say, "Well, I sent it, I mailed it, I never got it. Well, I sent it, So I have found that it's much better to go down there and collect it. That's what I have to do now. The ones that I manage, that I have to do that with, because the mailing thing doesn't work. It does for a couple people, but a very small percentage of the people that it actually works for. And again, this is the lower income, of course. It's not the big stuff, but they'll use that as an excuse. I can't remember where I was going with that.
Wouldn't it be neat? I mean, we've talked about like direct withdrawal and stuff, and that would be an optimum scenario when they move in, to set up and have them have a bank account.
I know what I was going to say. Yeah, exactly. It's easier to collect the rent in a multi-unit building. You can do it all in one full sweep. You can collect your $3,000 all in one day instead of having to go 10 different houses all over the city. It's much easier to collect rent that way, because very rarely will they mail it or anything.
What about would it be advantageous or not to require that in a lease? I'm just thinking ahead. Even if you charge a little bit less rent, but if you force them to have a bank account with direct withdrawal, is that throwing out the baby with the bathwater?
Well, I think if you've got tenants that would work for, a check would work through the mail. I think if you've got people that won't work for, that a check through the mail won't work, that's not going to work. That's what I think.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times they don't even have. The lady that we bought the apartment building off of, she said most of the time they will pay with cash if they're going to pay, and she was right. Most of them pay with cash.
They still pay with cash?
They still do. I mean, we don't manage that.
Clint wants to bring Black Cat and John. Had to say don't do that.
Yeah, but a lot of times they'll pay with. Most of the time they'll pay with cash. I mean, there's times when I've never. Yeah.
I never really thought about that.
I mean,
yeah, that's interesting. Because I thought a lot of people that are on public assistance, the government anymore direct deposits the vast amount of those checks that people get for Social Security or for
they
disability.
They have debit cards.
They have
debit card.
They have a debit card.
So they'll load a debit card.
85 to 90% of those people do, and this is generality that I'm just making it based on my experience. Do not have checks for the specific reason that checks have gotten them in trouble, and they only have debit cards on those direct deposit accounts.
And one thing that we have screwed one of our tenants from not cashing a check. Because they had a checking account and they had their monthly income, and we didn't cash the check quickly enough. So especially really for anyone that when you're in a landlord situation, when you're a real estate investor, you need to cash the checks quickly. Which we have learned that because they might not have the money in there, 2 weeks from now. Your upper end places, you probably won't have that problem, or people that
they don't have the wherewithal to balance.
They don't have the wherewithal, so...
You go and check the balance, and it says you got $500, so that means I can write a check for $500.
Yeah, and so the next day, you make a few purchases, and they don't have the money in there, so you have to...
You got hot checks.
Then you have... Yeah. So we have learned that when we do get a check from a tenant, we cash it the next day. Because if it's a check... I could go to the bank every day, I could go to the bank like every day, every other day, and I just don't do that. I try to go when I get the chance and deposit the checks all at one time.
Right, of course.
And so what I've done is the checks that we get from our rental business, I cash those immediately. The minute we get them.
And by cashing these deposit
them. And the stuff that I know I can, like other interests that we have, the things I know the money will be in there. Then I can hold off on those.
I tell you what will be interesting is once we get to the point where all the banks, and I'm assuming everybody's going toward this, where you can do your own check image for deposits.
Oh, I can't wait
I've
for
seen
that.
Chase does that, for example. You take a picture
do that.
with your phone, and you take a picture of the front, take a picture of the back, and
you deposit it.
And it's deposited?
It's deposited.
That's awesome. I would love that. I can't wait for that. Actually, yeah, because it's such a pain. That's awkward to say. It's such a pain in the butt to go to the bank. That's not, but it is. Because we get so much crap. We have so much crap going on. I could go every other day, and so I don't do that. But now, like the rental checks, there's people that I know. I better be getting this in there, And so I'll make sure that I get that in there the day. If I have to just clear my schedule, even, I'll make sure I get that in there because I know that it might not be in there.
It was good when it was written.
Right, it was good when it was written. They had good intentions.
Good intentions.
But it could. But that can quickly. But like I was saying, we screwed a tenant. No, we didn't screw her. We didn't do that because it's her problem. We don't have to be held it for a year.
You can ask a lawyer online right now if you're looking at our live stream. The current advertisement that Ustream's putting on there was asking about Ask a Lawyer Live. That's funny.
Yeah, and we should have. That would be an interesting one to have some attorneys on and have our. But anyways,
some of our attorneys. Yeah.
I had an isolated experience with a rental. I rented a house to a relative. A few years back, I rented a house. I had a house and I rented it to a relative, and I had a lease and everything, and I knew from the beginning that I knew that who I was renting to got a check regularly from the government, and that it was direct deposited and I set up an electronic transfer from his checking account to my checking account on the same day that his check was deposited each month. And so I did get my money every month. It's interesting. He after it was going on for a while, he didn't like that because he had cash flow problems, and he thought he probably could prioritize what he needed to pay, and put me down lower on the priority list if he could get that money. But the interesting thing was, he was a college graduate. He could have just as easily figured out how to stop that electronic payment from happening, but he didn't. He didn't call the bank and put a stop on that or this or that. Actually, we had it in the lease that I was going to set it up that way, that it was going to be by electronic withdrawal on the day of his monthly deposit. I had that language in the lease, and that worked pretty well, but that was an isolated special case. I don't know if that's something that's my only experience with being a landlord before now.
Man, it seems like that would create a lot of hassle if you can get somebody to do that. You don't have to go to the bank all the time, and it's in the account.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's not for everybody. Like
if I could sit at home and scan checks,
set that up with somebody.
We set like what Donnie was saying.
With as many tenants as possible.
Right.
It's just a lot easier.
You don't hear a lot about that. You don't hear a lot about people doing that. Like setting up direct deposit for rental payments, do you? I mean, I don't.
I don't either, but it seems like it would be very, like some little older people or handicapped people maybe that can't get out and do stuff, because we talked about maybe doing some handicapped accessible eventually, it seems like it.
Of course, you could put a check in the mail. I mean, they have to put other things in the mail. I don't think that's...
Well, but... Yeah, but...
I don't think handicap makes it... I mean, if somebody's got the money to pay the rent, I don't think that's it. I think it's... I'm of the opinion that the people that can afford to do it generally do it pretty... generally don't have those kinds of issues. And the people that can't afford it, that have money issues, they're not going to be able to maintain it. It's going to end up being more of a hassle to you than... I think it depends on... It depends on the location and how careful you are with to whom you rent. Mm-hmm. I think that if you get the right tenant in there, you don't need to do that, but you certainly could, because they would have the ability to do it. And in other situations, you wouldn't.
I guess it comes back around to screening the tenants. I got my money every month, predictably, but the relationship only lasted for 6 months because it got to a point where it was just unacceptable to him to have that done that way, because he was getting behind on his other bills, and he wasn't able. So he had to move out for those reasons. It wasn't, he didn't move out owing me money, but it's probably
I tell you, it's bothersome for people that are on borderline as well. It's bothersome on that, not seeing the money. Mm-hmm. That's bothersome. We had one similar where the check was basically that part of their income didn't go to. They never saw it. It went to us. It was a special circumstance for a short period of time, and it was very bothersome for that person. Very, very bothersome that they didn't see that money, even though they were going to turn around and write a check for it or give cash for it.
People like to see it.
Exactly. They like to have it in their hand, and it makes them feel good to dispense it. when it happens automatically, some people lose that.
Use that control.
Yeah, they don't like that. Not everybody's going to be like that. I can't make any generalities based on that, but I do know that happened in that one particular instance.
Yeah, people like to have some level of control of their lives. I remember my grandparents when they were when they got their Social Security or whatever. This has been several years ago. They were concerned about. They wanted to see the check. They didn't want the direct deposit. I think they gave them the option to have direct deposit back then. Now I think it's mandatory. I
have an aunt that gets hers still by check because she just refuses to.
Yeah,
I don't understand.
They wanted to see the check and hold. They wanted to have. They didn't want it directly deposited into their account.
She's from the 30s. Banks fail.
Yeah. Yeah, my grandparents were too, and they wanted.
She gets her check stolen out of her box.
she gets it stolen.
She'd rather risk that. That's a possibility.
Than a bank.
Yeah,
there's not been an uninsured bank
happened to her more than once, and she still.
So how do people still? I don't understand this. I don't have a criminal mind, so maybe that's what it is. But how do people steal your check out of your
more importantly,
box?
How did they get away with it? How do they get away
I know they steal it. I mean, that's not the problem. That's not where I have the problem.
I don't know if they.
But how do they cash it?
I don't know if they get it cashed. They steal it, and then she's got to call Social Security
and wait on a reissue.
Yeah, but I don't know if the check ever actually gets cashed.
Because that's an excuse that I get for people not paying their rent a lot of times. All my checks were stolen.
Somebody stole
my check.
Yeah, that is
I couldn't deposit it.
That's the number one excuse that I've ever heard is that.
Maybe that
my check didn't come in. They're doing a trace on it.
Yeah, that's very common. That's
number one. There's not one excuse that's more common.
It might be a good question to ask up front, which you might get a truthful answer because they don't know. They don't know.
Why you're asking that.
Yeah, the reason is your check direct deposited.
That's very good. I like that. That's very good. Now, do you have direct deposit on your check? Can you sign an affidavit saying that you do have it? I mean, seriously. Because when they come to you and say...
Do you have any problems getting your check? Do you have direct deposit on your check?
Because when they come to you and say, oh, my check was stolen out of my mailbox, or I never got my check, or that's, it's either they never got their check, it didn't come in the mail, or it was stolen.
Well, then it's going to be, it didn't show up in my account this month. I just don't know why.
Yeah, I mean...
I'm going to call them. They didn't...
Well, that's happened, because we had other people that were tenants that didn't receive a physical check,
it could happen. Yeah.
And we're all, and you can never get any verification. There's never any verification. Nobody can ever get verification.
There has been an exception where someone was able to get verification. They actually got me a letter from Social Security saying that there was a mix-up, and so I was very surprised. But you do every once. There are honest people, but the dishonest people make it hard for the people that are honest because you're constantly suspicious of. Because people are always trying to play tricks.
Insurance and healthcare.
Exactly. Oh yeah.
The bad screw it up for the good.
Exactly. I mean, so you do
Car
have
insurance. I mean,
you do have people that are telling the truth and do have problems. They didn't get their check or they didn't have, but 9 times out of 10 that's not the case. 9 times out of 10, they're feeding you line of bull, and that's why I don't. Some people, that's why typically I don't even have them mail it in, like the ones that we manage ourselves, because that's just a reason for them to have an excuse.
We've had such bad experience, especially from one particular tenant that's been there for a very long time.
Yeah.
And I really honestly think a good person, and she just can't. She just has issues. She has family things, and different things come up. But the number two reason, by the way, what the number 2 reason? There's 3 main reasons. One, my check didn't come in. The other one is the bank screwed up my account and I'm overdrawn.
The bank did it.
Yeah. And number 3 is my car broke down.
And this is a topic.
No, I have to pay for a car repair.
This is a topic. This is probably another topic I want to talk about.
We're way off topic.
Sometime in the future. Not really. We're not.
We are.
Not too far off topic.
This has nothing to do.
Yeah,
we're it's still in a multi-unit building.
It's still valuable.
But this is still valuable. but I'd like to talk about this at one
How much
point.
you want
When
to
do
pay.
you call it? When do you just erase the debt and start over? I mean, I was watching Susie Orman last night, and she was saying the banks are being stupid. They should just erase part of it and start over.
Absolutely.
Okay? They should just erase part of it, start over. People are getting on their feet, and then just start from a clean slate. You know. So when do you get to the point where you say to a tenant, "Okay, we have this tenant. You know, they paid a little bit at a time. You know, what Susie Orman was saying, the banks, when you're in foreclosure, won't even accept, unless you pay the full payment, they won't accept it. They won't accept partial payment or whatever. And they won't renegotiate the loan to just forget all that and start over. So when do you say, and we've been in this predicament before, when do you say, and we've actually done this, when do you start a clean slate? You know this person has income. When do you just forgive the past debt and start anew and just move forward, knowing that they'll never be able to catch up?
It sounds crazy. Well, that's what you have to do. You have to stop them before they can get to the point where it's easier or cheaper for them to move on and hold out for as long as they can hold out for eviction. Because that's what they are calculating opportunity cost. They do it. They don't call it that in their minds, but there gets to be a point when there's no way possible they can ever catch up. And we've had that. Now, the key to that is don't let them get there.
Yeah.
But if you have gotten to that point, sometimes it's better to work on collecting the next month's rent.
And forgetting about the previous.
And I think there's some value to that. I know somebody that's got a business where somebody wrote them a bad check, and then they refused to do business with them anymore because they had that outstanding bad check. Good client, paying, and then it got behind, then they wrote a big bad check, and then they refused to do business with them. Well, what they did was they stopped business, they stopped the possibility of making money on that person for a whole year, instead of realizing that
it is an interesting argument, and this strategy has been applied. It's being applied in the world. I think this is the I don't know if it's the Muslim. I think it's in the Muslim tradition that periodically debt is erased, and that financially, I mean, their banks work. Their banks have to follow that, and these traditional clerics in these countries where, maybe like Iraq or Iran or somewhere, that this is in the Muslim law that at a certain periodically everybody's debt is erased and you start over again. And what it doesn't mean that their financial, and they practice this, and that it doesn't mean that their financial system, it comes to falls apart. But what it is they practice. They are very, very careful about extending debt, and they are very careful about keeping their financial house in order so they don't accrue, because people don't let them accrue debt, because at some point that debt is going to go to zero. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that debt goes to zero, and it is it is a lot. I think it's a lot harder to get a mortgage there, because they are very, very stickler about making sure they get somebody that can pay that, because periodically back debt will go back to zero.
I have heard, in a related sense, and I don't know if this is true, but I've heard this. This is a really old wives' tale. That many times when people are having problems, once they declare bankruptcy, they are able to get more credit than before they declared bankruptcy. If they had, just bad credit, you can only file every so often.
Mm-hmm.
So once you've cleared that slate, it's my understanding that sometimes it's easier to get certain amounts of credit than before you declare bankruptcy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not comparing a person that's declared bankruptcy, someone has good credit, but I'm talking about before if they've gone a year of lousy payment histories. Then I've heard that. I don't know if that's true or not.
And the problem I have with this, especially in we're talking about multi-unit buildings versus single-family homes, and as far as investments goes, if we erase the debt, like if we say, okay, you can start, like in a tenant in one of our multi-unit buildings says, okay, we'll erase it. We'll start over. We know you have a guaranteed check coming in. Forget about that out. We just start over. So now you're getting a reputation of you just erased debt.
Right.
You just erased debt. You just let her get by with $2,000 worth of debt. So what's that keep someone else from coming in there and saying, okay, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to create some kind of problem or some kind of event in my life where I can't pay. I'm going to go. And then I'm going to say, hey, you erased hers. Usually they don't say that. Usually they don't say, oh, you did that for her. Why can't you do it for me? I didn't get that a whole lot. But you know that they know, and you know you have a reputation. You know that when a building gets a reputation or whatever, it's about reputation, and that's where I kind of deviate from Susie Orman's school of thought. You know, these banks have they have thousands and thousands of customers. They want the reputation of saying, okay, we're just going to forgive that debt, and then someone else does it, and then 5 years from now they expect. I mean, where do you draw the line? Do you
Well,
want to
I
get
think
the
it's-
reputation?
It must be harder
Well-
to get forgiveness too. I don't think they just arbitrarily.
Yeah, how do you do that? How do you?
Oh, yeah.
Of course, it's not arbitrary, but how do you get that? How do you get that?
There's also the
Where do you draw the
situation.
line?
There's also the situation that we've talked about before. Is when a person gets to a certain level, it's cheaper just to pay them to get out.
It is.
So that's another thing that you would have to that we get a reputation for. So I think you've got to be careful on all these things, and I'm not proposing that. The real way to stop this is to enforce your late payment policy
Right.
extremely strictly. That's the way to avoid all these what if this happens, what if this happens, what if this happens.
Right.
And you know what? What you're going to end up doing is evicting some good people that had the possibility of redemption. But I think in the long run, unfortunately, I'm jaded. But I think eventually in the long run, if you have the cojones and the hard heart to do this, you're going to have way fewer problems if you stick to and enforce that and don't make any exceptions.
Right.
I think in the long run, you'll be more successful financially and also with less heartburn. Less heartburn if you do that. It's a hard thing to do because I'm telling you, I can sit here and preach, and that's what we're going to do. And as soon as I get in front of the person, that's why that separation's so good. As soon as you get in front of the person, you say, "Hey," and it's and it sounds legitimate, and you think, "Well, what if I was in that situation?" But
that's why it's easy. That's why Walmart has. That's why businesses have a hierarchy of people. That way, that they, the person that's talking to the tenant says, "Hey, the top won't let me do it." They says, "You have to pay that late fee. I'm sorry, you got to pay it." That way you pass the buck on someone else.
Yeah.
If they think you have any flexibility, then they're going to say it, unless you're just hardcore and say, "I'm sorry, no." But if you pass the buck, maybe it's easier for you mentally. But like you said, you need to enforce that. That's what we talked about last week. My hands are tied. Yeah, like the inspectors, But that's what we talked about that a little last week. Enforcing the late fees, or was it the week before? Enforcing the late fees and knowing that, because a lot of our units are close together, even. Like how most of the units we have are like close together.
They're adjacent.
And they're adjacent to each other, and you know that those people talk. You know that they let me get by with. But we haven't had a problem with that too much. But in the multi units, yeah, it's a big problem. You have to be consistent with everyone, and we have to enforce the late fees. enforce the deposits. And right now, I'm like, don't even bother filling out an application if you don't have the first month's written deposit. Don't even bother.
Because it's a bad omen.
It is.
There's no bigger predictor. So we said this
A failure.
weeks ago. To me, there's no bigger predictor whether or not you're going to be able to maintain this than that. If you start out with any kind of a reason you can't do something,
Right.
you're doomed for failure.
Yeah. We've had people come up and say, will you make payment arrangements on the deposit? I'm like, no, I don't do that. It's very clear on the website that we don't do that. We make no exceptions. We do not make payment arrangements for the deposit. And so don't even fill an application. Because when they say, what about the application? They ask that, you don't hear from them. That's it. And so there's very few that actually get to the level where they fill out the application, submit to me all the information that they, the proof of income, the all the requirements that we need. Very few of them even get to that.
By the way, if you purchase a higher end unit, then you've got the money to float it. I think you can eliminate most of what we're talking about entry level. That's my
bread and
opinion.
butter houses.
Yeah, we're talking about entry level, and I think I'm of the opinion that if you go higher than that, you eliminate many of these problems. And this is a recurring theme. We talked about that last week, talking about our own personal rental experiences, and I think that's so. Don't listen to this and think that the whole world is like that.
Right.
It's about a certain level, which I think most of the people that are interested in learning about this, that's who's listening. I think it's appropriate for the audience, but there could be people that are listening that might have the money to do higher end places, and I think you've got room to be more finicky, more picky.
And you don't have to worry about forgiving debt in those types of environments either. Like at my apartment, which was a higher end one that I moved out of several years ago, my landlady would say, hit the road, Jack. I got two people that want your apartment behind you.
Exactly.
So, bye.
Exactly. That's right.
So I'm not going to forgive your late rent.
Right.
I'm going to evict your butt.
We'll go and sue you
Well,
if you have a job.
And that's
We're
a
going to
higher
sue
end
you.
place. She can afford that.
We're
Like
going to sue you.
We're going to sue you.
Garnish your wages.
Yeah. So
and that's
they have more recourse.
They have more recourse, and that's a big thing.
That's another topic.
That's another topic. But having recourse on someone, these people that go from job to job, they have no, you have no recourse on them, and so you have to put up with more. So that forgiving debt thing,
kind of iffy on that.
I'm iffy on that. I don't know. Donna, you had a
a good take-home message from all of this that I'm getting is that as far as being a landlord, being a manager of properties, of your own properties, is that you need to be consistent in your policies. You have to communicate specific details from the get-go with your tenants, what your policies are, and you have to have appropriate boundaries with your tenants. What kind of problems that you do want to hear, have a call about, and if you get a call that's not appropriate, if you get a call about noise or somebody's they're fighting or something like that, then you say those calls need to go to the police department. I'm going to go. I got to get off here. That kind of call, I think if I were you, I'd call the police department. I don't know what to do about that for you. Bye-bye, I'll see you on rent day.
Or my manager will see you on rent day.
Yeah, exactly.
How did you get this number?
Yeah, if you are being robbed or someone sneaking around your house, do not call your landlord, call the police.
Especially one that lives 20 minutes away.
Especially when the police station's across the street. In the case of one of our apartment buildings.
That's familiar.
Yeah. Our apartment building.
across the street.
One of your apartments.
Don't call don't call the landlord. Call the police.
Thank you,
It's
America.
about an hour. Yeah, thank you. So I don't think we're meeting next week, but we will have more interesting topics coming up for you the next few weeks and into next year, of course. So please visit us on landlordsjournal.com. We always like to have people visit us.
We continue posting our journal entries
Posting
on there.
entries of our exciting landlord life that we lead. So I guess we'll sign off here. Have a good afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
See you in 2 weeks.